Hi everyone, my name is Denise, and I'm gonna go over a few points about my paper and what I learned this semester doing it. So the three different identities that I decided to write about were my race and ethnicity, being a female, and my immigration status. Um, the two that I associated with privilege, well, the two that I associated with oppression were being a female and being Hispanic. And then with privilege was my immigration status. So I learned a lot about the course in the semester, and one thing that I really um, captured was that it was very difficult for me to gather what I had as privilege. There was every single identity that I went through kind of, didn't fit the privilege, didn't really um, give me an idea. And it was just very, very, very difficult for me to figure out what identity that I had was considered to be privileged. As being a double minority, it was very difficult for me to figure that out. So I learned that even though that I do have a lot of identities that I feel like are oppression, there are a few that I do feel like they are privileged. For example, like I said, my immigration status was one of them. Being able-bodied and able to walk and not have a disability, that's also having a privileged. Um, there are potential gaps in my knowledge, and one of those that I figured out was, why do we focus so much on our oppressions? What in society have we gathered? Who has taught us these, that we have all these identities that are considered oppressions, especially those who are minorities? Why do we focus so much on these? And one of the points that I figured was the media obviously has a lot to do with that. How they perceive all of these people who are of color, who are female, who don't have a legal status here. They just put them down and oppress them, and that's kind of what we see, and that's how we grow up. But like, I also wanted to know what else is out there. Why do we see these as being oppressions? Why don't we just focus on the privileges we do have and how we can better ourselves and the people around us? Um, and as far as going with like plans of how I continue to grow myself in a professional develop like in a professional manner, I really want to work with at-risk youth. And this is one thing that I highlighted in my paper, was that I feel like it all starts with us being young. How we learn what our identities are, how they're taught to us, and how we learn from others around us what those identities were. Ever since I was very, very little, I knew I was Mexican. I knew I was Hispanic. I knew that was my ethnicity, my race. I knew that's who I was. I knew that there were struggles that came with it, and I faced them growing up. Being discriminated against, followed in stores, being called all these different derogatory names. I grew up with that, and I'm very, very proud of who I am. But I saw as being who I am as being oppressed, not having privilege. And now the main word that everybody always throws around is white privilege, and you don't see that with other races or other ethnicities. And it goes back around with like the media. That's how the media puts us out to be. That's how we learn, is through others around us. And I really want to work with at-risk youth, and a lot of them are, for example, go into foster care, go into foster homes, or in group homes with different kids, and maybe live with a family that's different from who they are, and they lose their identities, they lose the sense of who they are, and there is a struggle with them to figure out how to grow up and define who they really are. And a lot of them, don't ever find that identity. They don't ever find that sense of grounding. They don't find that person that will help them discover those identities and how to better themselves. A lot of these kids that do go into the foster system age out of it, and then they're on their own, and most end up being homeless. Few do end up finding their way through and becoming successful, but a lot of them, get involved with drugs, gangs, violence. They do get involved, in these manners, trying to figure out, a family for them. And it's interesting because I've seen videos on Facebook, YouTube and stuff, where they do end up interviewing kids who are in gangs, and they say that that's like the only family they have. That's, that's, they grow up because that's who backs them up. And I feel like a lot of these kids who don't have that parental figure, I guess you can say, or that mentor to help them figure out those identities, seek it elsewhere, and sometimes it doesn't help them. It actually hurts them because they grow up in the gangs, or they grow up in violence and drugs, and they end up involving themselves in these situations. And this is one way that I want to kind of my career eventually either being a social worker, or somewhere in that realm of working with at-risk youth. I really want to help mentor them and help them, figure out who they really are, and let them know that, they are a person, they do mean something, and they do have an identity, and it's very important that they know these things so they can better themselves, better their future. So yeah, that's kind of how I want to grow in my professional like in my professional field, and really take that with me. Um, Something that I learned about myself in this course, and I've already touched on a little bit, is that it was just, again, very difficult for me to find identities that I had that were considered privileged, because being oppressed, and all my identities of how I'm not privileged really didn't help me figure out. It was very, very difficult to get that. And more generally, I learned that it is very important to know your identities. It is very important to know who you are and get to know them, and really know how to use those identities to better yourself and better the people around us. Being a first generation graduate, it is very important for me to show, like my younger brother, you can do it. My parents are from Mexico, and they didn't even finish elementary school, because they had to drop out and help their family out, work in the fields and the farms, at a very, very young age, to help support their family, as they weren't very wealthy, and they really had to figure themselves out. But they made it here to the US, and they're both now residents, and they were able to help better their lives to build a good foundation for myself and my younger brother. We were both born here. We're, citizens of the United States, and we have to really use that as being citizens, and having the possibilities of going to college and not struggling to find financial aid. It's very, very important to take advantage of these identities that we have, and learn how to better ourselves. Really learn what privileges we have, and not focus so much on the oppressions. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. I kind of touched on a little bit. I really hope you guys enjoyed my video, and I can't wait to see what everybody else had to say about their paper.